Okay, let's unpack this. We've got a mountain of source material today, all dedicated to the absolute foundation of baking the flaky crust.
Hmm.
If you've ever tried to make a pie and just ended up with a dense, sad shell, this deep dive is for you. We're focusing on one fundamental technique, pâté brisé.
That's right. And for you, the goal here is less about one single recipe and more about, pulling out the universal golden rules of pastry.
Immutable laws.
Exactly. We'll look at how those rules get applied and sometimes tweaked across three very different, very demanding applications. We've got a massive apple pie, these elegant poached dumplings, and then a really precise savory tart.
Right. So if you, as the learner, want to stop feeling overwhelmed by these super complex baking recipes, this is your toolkit. We're going straight into the techniques, the little facts that prevents failure, and make sure you get those flaky, light results.
And we have to start with those non-negotiable foundations. When you boil all this material down, there are three core rules for a successful pâté brisé.
And this is where it gets really interesting for me. The sources are absolutely uncompromising on these. It's make it cold, bake it hot, and if possible, use a food processor.
Right.
So why the food processor? Why not the traditional, by hand method?
Well, the processor is basically a shortcut for speed and consistency. The friction from your hands or just mixing too long, that's the biggest enemy. It introduces heat.
Uh,
The food processor does all the work of cutting the fat into the flour in, seconds? It just minimizes that heat contamination. It's the make it cold rule in action.
so let's break down the base recipe then, the sweet pâté brisé that's going into the pie.
It's a really simple composition. You've got 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour and 1 teaspoon of salt. But the technique says you have to pulse those two dry ingredients together first.
Why? Why not just dump it all in?
Because you need that salt fully and evenly distributed. The sources even mention that the salt, by extension, should be cold. It sounds obsessive, I know.
Cold salt. Wow, that's a whole new level of discipline.
It is, but it speaks to the principle. Every ingredient carries latent heat. And when you get to the next step, 2 sticks of hard, cold butter, every single degree counts.
Okay.
The butter has to be diced, cold, and hard. The processor cuts that fat into the flour, and it creates these tiny little packets of butter. Those packets are what will become steam, and that steam creates the flakes.
So if the butter's too warm, it just melts in and you get, what, a cookie crust?
You get something tough, like a shortbread, not flaky. So then we get to the liquid. This is the moment I think everyone panics.
This is where I always mess it up. One drop too much and it feels ruined.
The recipe calls for 1/2 cup of iced water, and the method is almost surgical. Here's the key step. While the processor is pulsing, you pour the water onto the outside of the food processor tube.
The outside, not directly into the mixture.
No, not directly.
Yeah.
It controls the rate of absorption. If you just dump it in the center, you get these wet clumps, and then you have to overprocess the dough to get it all hydrated.
Which makes it tough.
Exactly. By pouring it gently down the side, it sort of spirals into the mix, distributing the cold water really effectively, and the dough comes together fast. You just pulse until it starts to cohere. The sources say it looks pretty much done. Then you stop.
That's it. Don't overdo it.
Absolutely. You flatten it into a disc, wrap it in plastic, and then it chills. And this recipe gives you enough for one good crust. So for a double crust pie, you need 2 batches. That chilling time is completely non-negotiable.
Okay, so that chilling step, that's the foundation we're cooling down before we bake it hot.
Precisely. You are setting the stage for that thermal shock that creates the ultimate flakiness.
All right, let's transition that beautiful chilled dough to our first application, which is this grand, mile-high apple pie. The recipe's not kidding about the scale. We're talking 5.5 pounds of apples.
Yeah, it's a monster. And the key isn't just the volume, it's managing that volume through complexity. If you used 5.5 pounds of just one apple, like Granny Smith's, it would be, overwhelmingly one note.
Just sound.
Super sour. So the recipe demands a blend. You've got the tart Jonah Golds, the huge, deeply flavored Mutsu apples, and then the Granny Smiths for that dependable structure. You need that range.
And for that enormous pile of fruit, what's the trick to keep it from browning without making the filling all watery?
The juice of 2 whole lemons. And here's a great little kitchen tip from the material. Cut the tips off the lemons before you squeeze. You get way more juice out that way.
Oh, I'm trying that.
Then for the dry filling, you mix 1 cup of sugar, 2 teaspoons of cinnamon, a little pinch of salt always, and 1/3 cup of all-purpose flour. That's your thickener.
And the mixing technique is also important, right? I always end up with bruised, broken apple slices.
Yes. Avoid metal. If you use a metal spoon, you're going to break up the apples. The mandate here is to use your hands, which is best, or a big rubber scraper. You want everything coated without damaging the fruit.
Okay, so once that massive filling is ready, let's talk assembly.
Right. You roll the bottom crust to less than an eighth of an inch thick. And to move it, a key technique is to roll the pastry up onto your rolling pin.
Ah, to carry it.
Exactly. It lets you transfer it to the pie dish without tearing. You fill it high with those apples, and before the top crust goes on, you dot the filling with little pieces of unsalted butter.
Butter on top of a butter crust. I can get behind that.
And for the top crust, you lay it on, crimps the edges, and then cut the excess. But you turn that little bit of remaining crust over to reinforce the sides. And of course, vent holes. You need those little slits for steam to escape.
What about that professional-looking finish? That shiny glaze?
That's an egg wash. It's just 1 egg yolk and 2 tablespoons of water. You brush it on with a soft bristle brush so you don't tear the pastry. Then you finish with a light sprinkle of coarse sanding sugar. Gives it a beautiful sheen.
Okay, now for the bake it hot schedule. The moment of truth.
This is all about controlled thermal shock. You have to preheat your oven to a blistering hot 450 degrees.
450.
The pie goes in at that temperature for the first 15 minutes. That blast of heat makes the cold butter release steam super fast, pushing the layers apart. It sets the flake. After 15 minutes, you immediately lower the temperature, and then it's a long bake. The example took an hour and 35 minutes total.
That's a serious commitment. So how do you know for sure that it's done?
You can't just trust the timer. The best method is to take a bamboo skewer and push it through one of the vent holes all the way to the bottom. If you feel zero resistance, the apples are cooked. Any stiffness at all, it needs more time.
Fantastic. So we've taken the rules and made this rustic masterpiece. Now let's shift to something completely different, much more technical, more delicate. The poached pear dumplings.
Right, and what's fascinating here is the dough is the same pâté brisé, but the flavor is all about the really intensive prep of the pears themselves.
Let's talk about that poaching liquid. It sounds like quite an investment.
It is. The sources recommend 2 bottles of a flavorful Italian organic white wine, plus 2 cups of sugar, the zest and juice of 2 lemons, and then 1 whole vanilla bean.
Okay, but if I'm the learner on a budget and I just use cheap wine, how bad is that, really?
It actually makes a huge difference because you're going to reduce this liquid so much. Every little nuance in the wine gets concentrated. A cheap wine can turn bitter or just taste flat. The good wine gives you that deep, complex background flavor.
Good justification, then. And the vanilla.
1 whole bean. You slice it, scrape out all those thousands of little seeds, and throw both the seeds and the pod into the liquid along with 2 cinnamon sticks. You bring that to a boil, then add 5 large pears and cook them for about 30 to 35 minutes.
But the real secret is what happens after they're cooked.
Correct. The pears are chilled in that cooking liquid. Then you drain the liquid off, put it back on the heat, and boil it aggressively until it's reduced by half.
Wow.
That super concentrated syrup gets poured back over the pears, and the whole thing is refrigerated overnight until it's, and I quote, really, really cold. That's where the intense flavor comes from.
Okay, so once they're chilled, you fill them.
Yep. You use a melon baller to scoop the seeds out from the bottom. Then you fill that little cavity with a mix of cinnamon sugar and a few bits of unsalted butter.
Then we're back to the pâté brisé.
The pear goes onto a triangle of pastry. You brush the edges with egg wash to seal it, making sure it's totally encased. And you can get fancy here, adding little decorative leaves, using water as a kind of glue.
And I'm guessing you have to chill it again before baking?
Always. Chill the whole assembled dumpling.
Yeah.
Then a final egg wash, more sanding sugar to gild the pear, and they bake at 400 degrees for 30 to 35 minutes.
A little lower than the pie's initial blast.
Exactly. The pear is already cooked and it's more delicate. And here's a brilliant little tip. You put tiny parchment paper caps over the pear stems so they don't burn while the pastry gets golden brown.
I love that. That's a tip born from experience. And for serving.
You use that remaining poaching liquid. By now it's reduced even further into this thick, shiny, lustrous jelly. You just spoon that around the dessert.
Okay, from sweet and delicate to something totally savory. The tomato tart with can-feeded tomatoes. The pâté brisé is back, but there's a crucial change.
This is where you see the genius of the base recipe. The difference between a simple sweet pastry and a robust tart shell comes down to 1 ingredient. 1 whole egg.
One egg. That's it?
One egg, and you reduce the water way down to only 2 or 3 tablespoons of iced water. The egg adds lecithin and protein, which binds it all together and gives you a much firmer, more stable crust that won't get soggy.
So it's strong. It can hold its shape.
Exactly. And of course, this dough also has to be chilled for at least a half hour.
Okay, so let's talk about this filling. It sounds incredibly time-consuming.
It's a labor of love, for sure. The tomatoes are confited, slowly dried to concentrate their flavor. You have to peel and seed them first. The trick is to score an X on the bottom, blanch them in boiling water for about 30 seconds, then plunge them into ice water. The skins just slip right off.
And after peeling and seeding them,
You lay them out on parchment, drizzle with olive oil, salt, pepper, fresh thyme, and you cook them very slowly at a very low temperature, 275 degrees, until they shrink and become, well, the essence of tomato.
and there's roasted garlic too.
Yes, a whole head of garlic, wrapped in a little parchment package with salt and olive oil, roasted right alongside the tomatoes. The cloves get completely soft and caramelized.
Okay, now for the crust assembly, the blind bake.
Right. You roll out the pastry and gently put it into a black steel tart pan with a removable bottom. A key technique here is to fold the dough down to reinforce the sides, which helps prevent them from slumping.
Then you dock it, poke it with a fork.
You dock it to prevent bubbling, line it with parchment, and fill it with pie weights, lentils, beans, whatever you have. The blind bake is quick and hot, 425 degrees for 10 minutes with the weights. Then you take the weights out and bake for another 5 minutes or so until it's lightly browned.
Got it. And once that shell is baked, we layer the filling.
First, you spread that soft roasted garlic all over the bottom. Then a sprinkle of a semi-hard cheese like Comte, sort of like Gruyere, but nuttier and more thyme. Then you arrange 24 of those cooled, oven-dried tomatoes very tightly in a flower pattern.
24 of them. That explains the prep time.
It does. Finally, a little more salt and pepper, and top it with the rest of the grated Comte, about 10 ounces total. Then it goes back in the oven at 375 until the cheese is just melted and bubbling.
Wow. We have covered a huge amount of ground today. We started with flour, butter, and those 3 golden rules, and we ended up with 3 totally different results. A flaky pie, a delicate dumpling, and this firm, savory tart.
And if we bring it all back to the core lesson for you, the learner, it's that the success of every single one of these rests on controlling temperature. Cold ingredients for flake, chilling for stability, and that precise high to low heat in the oven.
And the most amazing insight for me, the difference between that sweet pastry and the strong, savory dough was just 1 egg and a tiny bit less water. That's what mastery is, knowing how one small change alters everything.
Precision is everything in baking.
You've seen how precision in temperature and ingredients can elevate simple flour and butter into 3 masterpiece dishes. So now, think about where else in your life, in your work, in your projects, you can apply that golden rule, the rule of chilling your foundation before you turn up the heat. What's that one foundational element you might be neglecting to cool down before you try to bake it hot?